Yeah, so I'm just gonna get started here. Yeah, so the meeting is gonna be recorded, so feel free at any time, like if you have any questions, feel free to unmute. You can leave your camera on and off, whatever you like, but just a warning that the meeting is gonna be recorded. Yeah, so I'm just gonna get started with the presentation. At any point, feel free to put any questions in the chat. I'm gonna do a question and answer at the end, so I'll get to any of your questions then, but if you wanna like pop in if like there's something really relevant, just feel free to like unmute and ask a question because I might not see the chat right away. Are you guys able to see my slides up here? Not sure if, yes, okay, great. Perfect. So yeah, and if anything on the technical side gets a little wonky, just let me know and I can definitely fix it. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to be a successful student for professional school. We're going to be talking about more specifically about medical school, but this definitely applies to everything. So if you're in a different path, definitely there's some lessons to take away here too. So here's just like a bit of an introduction about myself. So my name is Jalen and I'm a first year medical student at McMaster right now. And before McMaster, I did my undergrad at Laurier in the health sciences program there. I did 3 years of my degree there before applying and coming to med school at Mac. And I just started this past August. And before, when I was applying to med school, I was a client at Future Me MD. They helped me a lot with my application and preparing for interviews. And now I work for the company helping students apply now this year. And so I have my email up on the slide. Feel free to take a screenshot of that or reach out at any time if you have any questions about like applying to med school, anything specific about McMaster, especially with interview season coming up. I know it can be really stressful, and I know I definitely reached out to a lot of people that I knew who had gone through something similar. So yeah, feel free to reach out at any time, and I would love to help. And here's like a photo from my virtual white coat ceremony. Anyways, so let's talk a bit about professional school. So there's lots of different types of professional schools. Some of the big ones that I put up on the screen are things like med, dentistry, pharmacy, and vet school. But there's obviously different types as well. And while each school is different, and I can really only speak specifically to the process of getting into med school, there's a lot of core values that overlap between any. So no matter what path you're on, I think there's a lot of very similar lessons you can take away from my experiences and within some of the ideas that we're going to talk about tonight. So yeah, just a disclaimer that I only specifically have the experience of going through the process to medical school, but some of the core values, things like being a scholar, like being passionate, being a leader, I would say they're pretty universal. So hopefully you can still take something away no matter what path you're on. So talking about the path to medical school, like it's very stressful. These are some of the things that went through my mind. I know when I was going through it, you're worrying about your grades, you're worrying about your activities. If you're like me and don't really know many people, like family or friends who are in medicine, you might be wondering, am I even doing the right things to get in? How do I know if I'm doing the right things? And then there's also that sort of sense of self-comparison. Am I doing enough? Someone else is doing more. And then just like the kind of overwhelming stress that comes with it are all things that I can definitely relate to. But that's why it is very important to make a plan. So as I'm sure many of you know, pursuing professional school can be super overwhelming. But taking time to sort of step back and make a plan is something that's really been helpful for me in my own life and something I really recommend other people do as well. So I put a pyramid up here because I feel like that really applies to how this works. If any of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, it's kind of an idea that humans have different levels that they can achieve, but you can only get to the next level once the level below it has been taken care of. So if we think like on the bottom level are things that are our basic needs like food and water, and we can go up higher at higher levels. And I think like the top level is self-realization, which is more of like an abstract concept. So kind of a big science level idea, but if we take that into the path to professional school, we can put things like our own well-being on the first level. You can't really succeed in school if you're not taking care of yourself first. So you want to make sure you're taking care of yourself, your mental health, your physical health, like taking time for self-care, which is super important. And once you've dealt with that, you can definitely work your way up. And I would say on the next level would probably be your grades. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but professional schools definitely put a big emphasis on this here. So you want to really own in on your study skills and feel comfortable with that before we move up to things like extracurriculars and leadership experiences and research and all those other things. So if you can divide it into levels, you can sort of make a plan for what you want to tackle next, and then you can be a lot more successful. And this doesn't matter. This is not something that you can only do when you're first starting university, whether you're a first year, a fourth year, a grad student who's now applying to other professional schools. It's never too late to reassess and make a new plan, check in on your plan, and that sort of personal feedback can be really helpful. And if you can reflect on your own experiences, you can see what's been working well for you, what's not, and take that into consideration moving forward. So like I said before, you want to start with what I call the non-negotiables. So start with the foundations. And in this case, professional schools really do put a pretty strong focus on your grades. And that's something I would put pretty low on the pyramid as something that's really central to feel confident about before you move upwards. And I just want to put like a disclaimer here. That's not to say if you have grades already on your transcript that you're not the happiest with, that you can't improve and you can't move on from here. There's so much to your application, things about yourself that will set you apart. I would just say that when it comes to splitting your time, you want to start by putting as much time as possible into your courses. And then once you're feeling comfortable there, you can sort of split your time between other things. So you want to put the bulk of your time into your grades and focusing on tests and school. And then when you feel like you have some breathing room is where you would maybe want to start looking at other things. And this is really important, not just because you'll achieve great grades if you're focusing on school. You're also going to develop some really important skills, things like time management. You're going to have to do a lot of working with others along the way here. You're going to learn a lot about yourself and what you learn best, how you learn best, what topics you're most interested in. And these are all things that are going to really serve you well when you go to seek out leadership opportunities or research opportunities, or maybe it'll inspire you to start some volunteer work in an area that you are really interested in, or maybe you're going to meet a great connection that's going to help you down the road. So there's a lot of value in taking time to start with the foundations and just focusing on your coursework. So with that being said, what does that really mean? Like, how are we going to focus on our coursework? How are we going to own in on our study strategies? So there's a few things that you want to consider here. The first one, and it might sound silly, is just knowing your learning style. And this is something that people might kind of laugh at. It might remind you when you're younger and you would take those personality tests to learn what your learning style is, but there really is a lot of value in knowing what way you learn best because it's different for everyone. So this can be things like being a visual learner, being like an auditory learner, a hands-on learner, and knowing what works best for you is really going to help you work smarter, not harder, because you might spend double the time learning in a style that's not really efficient for you, and you can cut that time down and actually get a lot more out of your study sessions if you know what works for you. Like as an example, I went through a long phase in undergrad where everyone was watching like YouTube channels that had study videos. So I was trying to watch videos on topics that I was studying, but it wasn't really clicking. And I realized that I was someone who maybe benefited more from reading like an article or something from a textbook than from watching a video. And so when I had that learning curve, I was able to spend a lot less time studying because my study hours were a lot more efficient. And going off of this, there's also other parts of studying that are important to know and understand about yourself. So for an example, would you rather study alone or with others? If you're somebody who needs to be by themselves to focus, that's totally fine. And knowing how to set boundaries and, if people want to do work together, but it's not really productive for you, being able to say, okay, I need to go to the library for a couple hours by myself is really great and beneficial. And you'll be so happy that you did, because then you'll have that extra time afterwards, since you've been focusing so well, to do whatever you want with your time. On the other hand, if you're somebody who benefits from working in a group, you can get a lot out of this too. You can, studying with others is a great way to make some friends at university. Like some of my closest friends from undergrad are people that were in my classes and we would do work together. And as well, you can really benefit from doing work with other people because everyone has different skills. Everybody has a strong suit that's different. And so if you can take that opportunity to teach each other, someone explains a concept that they're really comfortable with, someone else who's not comfortable with it might feel really strong about something else. Everyone's going to benefit a lot, and you're going to make your study sessions a lot more robust and super helpful. Another thing is resources. A lot of universities offer some really great resources. Things like prep sessions to do review before exams are super helpful. They usually have older students running those, people who've taken the course already, and they're usually organized by the department or your professors. And the great thing is the people who are writing the exam are the department and the professors. So if you go to these sessions, you're usually going to have a good idea of what's going to be on the exam, and you're really going to benefit there. My university had weekly tutoring sessions that an older student would hold, and she would go over the concepts that we talked about in class that week. and it's a great way to do reviews. So just because these resources are there definitely means that you should be using them. It's a really positive use of your time, and I would really recommend seeking them out if they're not something that are really advertised. It's something that really helped me in undergrad. And it also, because these resources are usually very student focused, like students teaching students, you can kind of feel more comfortable to ask questions, maybe like a little less intimidating than asking a professor. So really recommend that too. And finally, when it comes to studying, it sounds intuitive, but obviously being proactive is a lot more helpful than being reactive. When it comes to learning about like your study strategies that work best for you, you don't really want to be experimenting the night before an exam, because if the study strategy that you've been using doesn't really pay off, there might be bigger consequences. Whereas if you practice these strategies a few weeks in advance when you're just doing homework or things that are more low stakes, if it doesn't work for you, it's not a big deal. You're just going to switch it up. And by the exam, you're really going to know what works best for you, and you're going to be a lot more successful. So I really recommend trying to start these things as soon as possible. We're kind of just coming on the end of the semester. So the new year is a really great time to have that experience and start trying some new things while you're getting comfortable in your new classes. Okay, so with that being said, once we've kind of felt comfortable with our schoolwork and things like that, that's the right time to move on to your extracurriculars. So I put a picture up here, this little flower diagram, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but it's the CanMEDS rules. And it's a list of traits that in medical schools here in Canada, we really highlight as things that are important. Things like being a health advocate, being a professional, being a communicator, I believe is one of them. There's a bunch of different traits, and they all kind of intersect because they're part of being a medical expert. So they're keywords, buzzwords that medical schools really stress that applicants show in their applications. But whether you're in medicine or another field, these are really important traits that definitely have overlap between the fields. So it's just a great kind of diagram to reference when you're thinking about things that you want to be showing and demonstrating in your extracurriculars. So what type of extracurriculars are important? I've listed some things up on the screen. Leadership is a huge one. You can get so much out of doing leadership roles, clubs at your university, organizations in the community, or faculty organizations within your programs at school are great ways to get involved in this. Then there's work experience, and people discount this one a lot, but there's so much that you can get out of work experience. It doesn't have to be related to science or the professional school that you're going into. Things like being a lifeguard, things like being a sales associate. You can get so many important skills here about communication, teamwork, time management, just being like a professional. It really shows a lot about yourself. So don't discount things here just because you don't think they're necessarily science related. That's like a really big piece of advice I would tell anyone who's putting together an application for professional school. And then there's things like volunteering, and this can have a lot of different ways of showing itself. So you can do volunteering that's more advocacy focused, which is awesome. A great way to show people what you're passionate about, making a difference and all that. But then on the other hand, volunteering is also a great way to gain some clinical experience, especially as a student. There's not always so many opportunities for students to get involved in the clinical setting. There's not that much you can do, but volunteering like in a hospital is a really good way to have that experience still, demonstrate that you enjoy working in the clinical environment. You're gonna learn a lot. I volunteered in an emergency room when I was an undergrad, and it was a great experience. It really showed me that I like working in the hospital. I got to see a lot of really cool things, and I got to help people, which was awesome. And then the last thing I have on this list is research, which we'll talk about in a little bit more depth, but is definitely something that gets thrown around a lot when we talk about professional schools and medical schools in particular. So something to keep in the back of your head if you haven't thought about this already, or you're just sort of starting to think about it, is something that is pretty important as well. So you might be thinking, I know that I was thinking when I realized that extracurriculars were a big part of professional school, I'm already so busy with school, how am I going to take this on? And so to that, I learned from experience that there's some really important things to consider when you want to get around that and find ways to add these things to your life, even when you're already so busy. So the first is you want to ask yourself, what will I actually enjoy doing? What will I enjoy spending my time on? And this might sound obvious, but a lot of the time, without even realizing it, we might be adding things to our plate just because we think we should be doing them, and realize that they do feel like a lot of work because they're maybe not what we want to be doing. And so on that topic, we we enjoy doing things that we want to do. And so if we're finding things like extracurriculars, clubs that are focused on issues you're passionate about, you're not going to mind spending a couple extra hours here and there. Or if you're working with a great team of people who are super nice and you enjoy spending time with them, like planning an event for an organization won't feel like it's as much work. So that's something I would really recommend you consider. That's also super applicable when it comes to research. If you're doing research in a field that you're actually interested in, even if you're pouring through like super boring articles, they won't feel like that because you'll actually be enjoying what you're doing. With that, I would also recommend finding things that work for your schedule and being realistic here. So this is something that I definitely experienced. You need to be honest with yourself about your hours that are the most productive, what your schedule looks like. For me, one big thing was kind of appraising whether I was more of a night person or a morning person. And for me, I was someone who got a lot of my schoolwork done in the mornings, and I was able to use my nights more for extracurriculars. And this is something that definitely makes me think of what I mentioned before, volunteering in the emergency room. I would volunteer in the afternoons, evenings, or from around like 4 to 7 or 8 p.m. But I had a classmate who had the same position as me, volunteering in the emergency room, who would do the super early morning shift starting at 6 in the morning. And so I know for myself that wouldn't be the most productive, even though I had the free time at 6 in the morning. I knew that wasn't good for my schedule. And so being honest with yourself about that will really serve you well because, if I had committed to doing those morning shifts, I probably would be like oversleeping. I wouldn't be, even if I got there on time, like I wouldn't really be feeling my best because it wouldn't work for my schedule. And I wouldn't be doing as good of a job when I was actually there doing my volunteer work. But when I went in the evenings, I was energized, I was ready to commit and put a lot of energy into it while I was there. So it will really show through if you make choices that are best for your schedule and best for yourself. Another thing is when you're adding things into your life, you want to do this one by one. You don't want to just take on a bunch of activities at once and be super frazzled and stretch them. It's always better to put more of your energy into only a handful of things than to only give a little bit of yourself to everything. Because those activities that you really can commit time, energy, and like passion towards, you'll do a much better job. People will recognize your commitment. But if you're only able to really lightly get involved in in a lot of things, but only at a very surface level, you won't really get that much out of it. It won't serve you that well later on if you're thinking about like putting this on your CV, like where you get to know people well, where you get to do like bigger, more impactful projects is really where you're going to benefit. And finally, something that you really just learned from experience, I know I did, is being honest and knowing when to say no. It's easy to take on so many things, but sometimes things come up. You might get a research deadline the night before you have a final exam. And obviously you have to prioritize your school, but you might be reluctant to tell your research supervisor because you don't want to disappoint them. But in these situations, the best thing you can do is be honest and say, I'm really stressed for this exam. It's the next morning. I don't know if I'll be able to do my best work on the project if I have to do it the night before. Can I have a small extension? And usually people are willing to be very reasonable. And if anything, they're going to be impressed that you spoke up and you did it proactively as opposed to at the last minute saying, I'm not going to be done in time. So being honest is always helpful. And especially when it comes to knowing when to say no and when to say, I need some help. So those are definitely my tips when it comes to navigating through extracurriculars. And so on that topic, to tell you a little bit about my own experiences. So I kind of split it up into the years. You can see how this kind of applied to my own life personally. So when I started first year, I was just getting used to university. I was a little overwhelmed. There was a lot going on. And I was just getting like acclimated with my coursework, which was a lot. And I felt like I had to spend all this time learning how to study properly. University, as I'm sure most of you know, is super different than high school. And as I was getting used to it, everyone around me was very go, 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 join clubs, do all these things. And so I started applying to a lot of clubs at my university. A lot of clubs had executive positions for first year students. And I applied to a bunch of clubs and I didn't get accepted to any of them. So I was freaking out. I was thinking, I'm never going to get into professional school. Everyone's doing so much more than me, that self-comparison, which we always do. But it ended up being a blessing in disguise because I had all this time to commit to my coursework. And I was really able to get some really solid study strategies. I did really well in my courses, and I was able to focus my time where it was most needed. And then later on in the year, I applied to some more clubs, ended up joining a club that did fundraising for hospitals. And I had just started seeking out volunteer opportunities, and I started volunteering at my local emergency room, which is a great experience. And these are all things that came later on. And while I was really rushing at the beginning to get into as many extracurriculars as possible, it was such a blessing because the extra time allowed me to really focus on school. And that's why I would really recommend to other people to also start with that before you're adding all these commitments. And then I was in a place where I was able to take them on. So then as I started second year, I continued volunteering in the ER. I started feeling more comfortable in my courses, taking those study strategies from first year, not having that same learning curve. And also, I had mentioned before that I had sort of had a hard time finding clubs to get involved in. And so me and my friend, who was also a science student, actually decided to start a club. We really wanted to get involved like in learning more and doing some fundraising for global health. And we didn't really have that at my university. So we started a club. I have a photo up here from an event we ran. And all of this is just to say that sometimes you have to make your own experiences and get a little creative. I had really been seeking out opportunities in this field and hadn't really found any. And so we decided to start a club at our school. And it ended up working out super well. This is from an event we had with Dr. Huang, who is the chief medical officer at Sick Kids, and I ended up having all these really cool opportunities that I would have never had if I had done all this stuff in first year and had gone down a different path. So just a reminder that it's always great to sort of step outside the box a little bit, do some things with a little creativity. You can always make your own opportunities, even if you're feeling stuck, which I definitely was when I was in first year. And then finishing this off into third year, I was taking on some more responsibilities with my existing clubs I was involved in, kind of making those experiences more long-term, focusing on my club that I had started the year before, and focusing on research a little bit more. So that's like how I kind of applied that into my own life. And so let's talk about research. Research is something that can be super stressful. It's something that gets talked about a lot when it comes to the path to professional schools, but it's hard to find information about it, especially if you don't really know anyone who is in the field that you're trying to break into. So what exactly is research? Something that I definitely didn't know early in my undergrad, but there's a lot of different types of research. So they can be more medical focused, or it can be focused on any area of science. It can be more chemistry based, psychology based, ecology. Research can be more focused on advocacy work or quality improvement, things like that. So research really does come in all shapes and sizes, and you can find an opportunity pretty much in anything that interests you. Once you find the field that interests you, you can seek out the opportunities, but you might be quick to say, I'm not interested in research because you don't enjoy maybe chemistry labs, but there's research that can come in all different topics. So don't write it off too soon just because you might think that you're not into the most traditional form of research. So with that, research can also be more lab bench based, which is similar to what you might do in a chemistry lab, like doing reactions and things like that. But you can also do clinical research, which is more focused on people-based as opposed to like cell-based, I like to say. And those are the type of research studies where as a research assistant, you might be talking to participants, doing interviews, things like that. So there's lots of different opportunities. But with that, what are you going to exactly be doing in research? Most research positions that go to students are the position of a research assistant. And that's normally when you're helping a doctor of some sort, like an MD or PhD, could be a professor at your university on their own research studies. They'll like delegate tasks to you, things like recruiting participants, doing literature reviews, doing data intake and analysis. It can like be so many different things. But my big tip here is to focus more on the skills that you're gaining than the actual research itself. Some people can be really adamant about wanting to get into a research study just to publish a paper. And while that's great, it's really hard to accomplish. And a lot of what you're really going to get out of research are those sort of academic skills of learning to look through academic journals and pull out important information, synthesizing data, things like that. Talking to people, communication skills are a huge thing that you can get out of doing clinical research or any type of research when it comes to working with like collaborators and things like that. So focus more so on the skills than trying to do any of these like big flashy things. And also use your summers to your advantage. Summers are a great time to try and get into research if you can. People do hire early. So if you're trying to get into research for the following summer, like the earlier the better. You can just cold email people. I would really recommend talking to your professors. If you did well in a certain class and your professor does research, which a lot of science professors do, send them an email, say, hey, I did well in your class and I would love to continue learning about this through your research. And you might have to follow up. It's a really common thing in research to have to follow up a lot. But it could totally work out and turn into a great position and a way to form a stronger relationship with this professor who can definitely help you out down the road. So that's just a bit about what research can be. And moving on, my next tip is to focus on your study schedule. So this is something that I really lived by in undergrad and still do now. Planning my weeks out one at a time is something that really helped me and continues to help me be a successful student. It can be super overwhelming when you see an entire month calendar that's filled with assignments, tests, like so many things, and you don't know what to focus on. So for me, I just take each week one at a time. Like I even do it now. I have my calendar on my desk. It has the week. I put everything in for the week and I can see it at a glance. I'm a really visual person. So if you are too, this might be great for you. And this is a great way to kind of block out your days. Time blocking is a really good organization strategy if you're familiar with it. But it's basically where in your calendar, you kind of add everything you want to do in the day. So maybe normally you would put classes in your calendar, like I have class in the morning from this time to this time, but you would also want to put in, I want to study anatomy from 2 to 4. And that way, when you sit down to study at 2 o'clock, you don't have 3 things in front of you and not know which one to pick. And then you don't end up getting any work done. If you know what you're going to do and you say, study anatomy, read chapter 2 in the textbook, that's what you're going to do. You can focus on it and then feel a little less frazzled. And I would say this goes for everything, like scheduling in your extracurriculars, meetings, social life, like dinner with friends, all these things. If it's in your calendar, you're going to feel better about doing it. You're not going to forget things. And it'll help you too, because if you're being punctual, you're remembering things, it's a great quality that people pick up on, and you're going to impress lots of people, whether it's your professors for being timely, your bosses, anyone, your friends are going to appreciate it. So it's something that really helps. And just like a little personal tip on this one, the reminders app on your phone, on your computer was like a huge lifesaver in this department for me. I would put all of my assignments, even like little things like pre-class work, little quizzes, into my reminders app with the date they were due. And then I would check them off every time I finished one. And it's a very satisfying feeling. You can see that you finished something, and that way you don't miss things. So just to finish off, I just want to talk about some random like tips and tricks and things that I wish I knew when I was a few years ago, and things that I continue to use now as a medical student. So the first is to form relationships wherever you can. This is huge. Relationships are huge in professional schools, in medicine, like it's a very small community. So you never know how someone you meet might be able to help you, or you might be able to work with them again down the line. So whether it's a professor, a volunteer supervisor, maybe another student that you're working with on a project, just being friendly and forming relationships can take you a long way. Obviously, your technical work and your school work and things you produce are super important, but when people remember you, they're going to remember like your demeanor, were you friendly and things like that, before they remember like the little technical things that you did. So just always, having a smiling face and trying to be someone who's approachable, who communicates well, and is a little outgoing, like it's something that really can benefit you in the long run, especially considering that professional schools often do require things like reference letters. So I'd really recommend keeping that in the back of your head wherever possible. The next is not to underestimate any experience. A lot of people jump at the chance to, they want to do research, but only to work on help author a study that's going to be published. Or people want to be the president of a club or an organization, but underestimate the fact that you have to start off as a general member or as a lower position. So just because a position might seem small now, especially if it's something that you enjoy, I would stick with it, because only through that do you kind of get those opportunities to step up and take on more and more responsibility, which is really helpful in the long run. And long-term experiences where you have growth to professional schools look so impressive. It shows that you're committed. It shows that you have this long-term pattern of being involved in something, and it's something that can come from a really small experience. So definitely don't underestimate these things that seem maybe not impressive or not worth putting on your CV. There's a lot of value there. Another one is something I already mentioned, but doing what you enjoy will always benefit you. If you're really into a sport, there's some sort of art that you're really into, whatever your hobbies might be, don't stop doing them just because they're not related to the professional school you want to go into. These are things that are set you apart, that make you unique, and any school will be really impressed to see what makes you you. So definitely don't stop doing something just because you feel like it doesn't fit the mold of what you're trying to go into. Stick with it, and it'll actually be a huge asset to you. And finally, is just keeping track of everything. It can be really overwhelming when you're trying to apply to professional school and you want to be a successful student and you feel like you have to do all these things and things slip your mind. You're trying to remember what you did here and here. Something I did throughout undergrad is I just had a note on my phone in the notes app, not very organized. And every time I would start a new activity, I would add to the list. I would maybe put like a brief summary of what I did, like an estimation of how many hours I worked on it, and just like a name or two that I could reach out to down the road when I wanted to put it on an application or something like that. And this was super helpful because over the years, you accumulate things, you forget about little things, and keeping track of them in this way was a really easy reference. And I still have the note in my phone now. It's just like a really easy thing that can help you keep track of things because you don't need one more thing to worry about. All right, so yeah, just to finish up, so that's all I have to say for today. Future Me MD is a great company. They have really valuable services, things that I used when I was applying, things that I would recommend to you guys too, things like having a general consultation, like no matter where you are in your path to professional school, it's always helpful to take a step back and talk to someone who has been in your shoes, can give you some guidance. I know that for medical school specifically, interview season is right around the corner. And I use Future Me MD to prep for my interviews. They're super helpful, and there's lots of different consultants, myself, and other people who would love to work with you, who have experience from all sorts of different interviews from different schools. So I would definitely check that out. And a new service that we're offering is tutoring for people pretty much of all ages, from elementary school up to university, as well as specific tutoring for the MCAT and DAT. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out. There's a lot of great services. And yeah, so I will answer any questions that anyone might have. Feel free to put any questions in the chat box or message me privately. And I'm just going to stop the share now. Okay, so I see some questions here. I'm going to stop the recording